So our top story this morning, leading everywhere really, is the deal, the BRI deal that's been torn up, taken out of the hands of the Victorian state government by the feds. It seems pretty unanimous from a federal point of view anyway, that this had to be done.
Yeah, good morning, Pete. I think it's kind of the inevitable endpoint, if you like, when this legislation, this national security legislation, which gave the foreign minister these powers passed last year, that this was probably going to happen. And interestingly, the comments from the Victorian government seem to be that they're saying it's a matter for the federal government, and therefore I suppose the federal government's got to deal with the fallout. I think the main thing here will be, you're right, it's not terribly controversial in isolation. It's just what's the impact here in terms of the broader Australian-Chinese relationship? And I suppose I'm quite concerned, Pete, about once you sort of shake COVID through the economy and maybe in a couple of years' time, where are Australia's exporters left? China has been such an important market for us for decades now. When we get through COVID and the extra stimulus that's in the economy, what's the impact going to be for regional communities because of this, the worsening, I suppose, economic and diplomatic relationship between Australia and China? How does that get turned around? Having these things constantly playing out in public, I don't think helps. I think at some point there's going to have to be some rapprochement between Australia and China.
Was Daniel Andrews naive here? You know, is he the naughty boy in the schoolroom now that's been called out by Big Brother? Because Michael Shoebridge on the show earlier made a really interesting point that China's exposed the gap between the state governments and the federal government, knew it wasn't going to get anything through with the feds, so tried through the state and found an opening. So they've been quite crafty.
Yeah, look, I'm not so sure about the naughty boy. I mean, I think state governments do have an important role to play when it comes to identifying strategic trade and economic opportunities for their states and their exporters when it comes to Asia-Pacific markets, for example. That happens quite a bit. I suppose this was a little bit unusual in terms of striking a deal between a central government and a state government. So obviously now the time for that is past. That won't be happening under these new arrangements. I suppose states will still look to try to find edges and advantages to be able to get their businesses and their exports a better deal. So that'll keep on playing out. But I'm just concerned, Pete, about that broader relationship and how things play out over the next few years.
Do you think the Port of Darwin is on shaky ground now?
Oh, well, look, I don't know. I mean, unless there's going to be taxpayer money put on the table by the federal government, basically forcing, to bring it back, I don't think that's likely. I think, clearly that was a mistake. It wasn't properly screened by the Foreign Investment Review Board. That was a weakness which was exposed. There's been changes since to make sure that can't happen again. So I think probably if we had it all over again, we wouldn't have ended up with that particular agreement going through that way. But the changes have been made, which is good. I suspect you can't unscramble the egg now. It's a concern. I know there's concerns by Queensland nationals who have been there's an inquiry going on at the moment. But I think it's probably too late. The horse is bolted on that one.
Okay, on to the climate conference. Begins tonight, led by the US President. They are going to make new ambitions, new targets, as a matter of fact. So they are expected to cut emissions, or they want to cut 50% of their emissions by 2030. That's based on 2005 levels. That doubles what we're trying to do. Does that put more pressure on us, do you think, to make our targets a little tougher, for want of a better word, than what we're doing?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we've discussed this before, Pete. It's, the change and the swaying of the climate change winds, and now they are really ramping up the pressure on the federal government here when it comes to targets, further initiatives, diplomatic pressure, carbon tariffs, potential missed economic opportunities for Australians and Australian exporters we've been talking about today. So there's a whole lot of international pressure. Even yesterday we saw former defence chiefs talking about the security risks of not adequately dealing with climate change. So there's a lot of international and external pressure now on the Australian government. To be fair to Morrison, he's put on the table another clean energy measure in the lead up to that summit tonight. So that's obviously good for us, and it shows that we're listening and we're aware of what's happening with developed economies. But it's always down to how does this shake out in terms of the domestic political debate as well.
Yep. All right. Good one, James Cullen. Appreciate that. Thanks, mate. Beard's looking terrific too, by the way. Really masculine.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
All right.